Have you ever wondered what happens as a concept designer when you have too much time on your hands and your brief is too loose? Maybe you don't have a brief. Maybe you just have the luxury of infinite time and infinite iteration. What happens with the design process? What are the pros and cons there? My friend Martin said on Instagram the other day that when you find yourself iterating too much, it is usually a sign that you don't know what you're doing. No, that you don't know what you're looking for. What is your mission? And I think that's absolutely true. At the same time, I think there are certainly some benefits to that chaos. So let's look at a process, check it out, see pros and cons, and at the end we'll pick it up with some more thoughts. I'm Rasmus. This is Technouveau. Let's check it out. So here we are in Blender, and I am starting by doing the usual, selecting pieces that catch my eye, that I think look interesting. And I have this inkling that I want to do something, a ship design that feels powerful and that feels purposeful and strong. Choosing different shapes here and plopping them together, and initially and rather quickly I get this notion that I wanted to have wings, sort of half wing, half landing gear. So I put these on the side. I choose a cockpit section that has, you can see I'm playing with two different looks here for the cockpit section. And I'm playing with something that feels almost like a locomotive. Like really powerful, really heavy, really something that can crush through barriers and whatnot. Again, looking back, this is an earlier version of the asset pack that I've been doing, and I'm diving in there again, like I always do, to find parts that I like, that have shapes that I can use. You can see the nose section is quite clear. It has that locomotive sensation, and then as for the other parts of the ship, I'm playing with different types of parts. It has sort of a tail that comes back and narrows, and then on top of that I have an engine compartment. You can see I'm playing with wing attachment to this landing gear, sort of gunship wing, whatever, and I'm choosing shapes that when put together gives a sensation that this might be able to support the ship when it's landing, or maybe even support shocks if it's landing quite heavily. So I give this sense of a swivel and a suspension components. Adding engines as well, and here I'm playing with a shape language that has these rounded intakes and rounded jets to counter what is otherwise a quite airplaney or quite atmospheric looking ship. So we have these different flavors going together. I like my forward swept wings. Those of you who've seen a few videos will know that for sure. And I'm doing that here as well. Looking at the butt of the craft here. I like the shoulders of this ship. It has sort of a shoulders and then the wings that come out. It feels quite strong in that sense. Again, playing with the notion of how forward and how strong these pontoons should look and feel. And I like this here strengthener. I think it gives it that unknown but sort of familiar sense of a rig that can move. Again, I'm always adjusting angles on surfaces and little details as the design moves forward. And I'm really liking this long hull-like half helicopter, half freight train body in the middle. You can see I have a few different shapes going on. That's the long center. There is the shoulder line with the wings, and then there's this rounded flavor at the back. Actually, this is a design that some of these flavors I'm doing quite a lot. There's definitely some pattern in me that wants this shape to manifest in the world. Trying different engine layout configurations to see what feels reasonable, what feels to have the right balance between surprise and expected, or let's say comfortable. And again, having a good time with these wing struts and support shapes here. So here I think the balance has been to understand what shapes play together well and what shapes add surprise. And I think when you zoom out, you can see that the overall shape feels quite cohesive and it feels solid. And I think the overall idea comes through pretty nicely. There is that rounded shoulder falcon-esque shape on the shoulder line of the ship that I will definitely come back to, and you will see that a lot in this video. And constantly adjusting the sensibility of the wings there and how strong they are and how centered to the body they are. I was pretty happy with that, and I decided to refine this with some more shapes. Always have fun with a little cannon here and there, right? Put that in the nose. And this idea of some sort of beechcraft, what do you say, a landing craft, or sort of something that's both a gunship but also can be a troop carrier, is starting to manifest. And here I'm playing with the notion of different types of weaponry, that loadouts and gun ports and whatnot. Both missile launchers and sort of a classic sort of missile and bomb array under the wing there. Right here I'm struggling with adding components to the exterior of the shape or integrating them into that pontoon in the foot, and I think integrating them feels most holistically pleasing. I'm also adding this very well-known shape and texturing it. You can see easy texturing I'm doing, and I'm just using this texture atlas here to map it quite simply. And I'm using these sort of retro flavors for something like this wing here. I feel pretty good about where it is. Let's skip ahead in time a little bit, and here I'll show you some of the different takes that happened when I forgot to record, in fact. And there's the ship you just saw, and there is another ship that has a long tail. It has the same wings, but they're moved forward, and it has a tail in the butt. And then there's this version where the wings have been moved forward and down underneath the cockpit, and a sort of strange that sort of strange shape as a sort of a hover component in the middle. And then at last here, taking the same shapes but choosing a smaller cockpit, scaling that up so it almost becomes a fighter. So these were some of the designs that happened without me hardly thinking about what the hell was going on, and it went really quick, and it sort of just ran away with me, for better or worse, and we'll discuss that at the end a little bit more. The design that has this rounded shape, it feels strangely familiar, but also oddly surprising, and I decided to put some more time into that. But with the benefit of the shape being so odd, the central sort of loop shape being so odd, at the same time I want to ground the design a bit, so I'm adding engine parts, intakes and exhausts, as well as experimenting with landing gear, and that is to weigh up the outlandishness of that odd loop shape and then ensure credibility at the same time. Because I have these different designs side by side, one of the things that I get to do is, when I've been working on one design for a little bit, I come back to one of the earlier designs and I can view the layout, the construction and how it's formatted, the whole shape, and adjust it accordingly. So some of the pros of that is that my sensibilities get normalized, and the designs can become a family or not. The upside is no design is allowed to become too weird and outlandish and it's almost like flipping a 2D drawing, right, left to right. No designs can go off the map completely. At the same time, I think that the downside is if they are all normalized against the same criteria. How do I ensure that I can go nuts and go out and explore an idea really, really far? So there's something there where that balance wasn't struck in this particular case. Here I'm just going over the different models, and I'm evaluating what I like about them. And what I really like about this one is having a body that's vertical, and then having these accents that are horizontal, so the shoulder line and the wings up front. I decided to accent that a little bit more, and this is really inspired by classic designs like helicopter designs like the Sea King, for instance, Sikorsky Sea King, which has these giant turbine intakes up front and then this long narrow body that comes back to the landing gear at the back. So and here I'm really toying with the intakes. So what is happening here is that what has gone from feeling like a design that could belong to a Star Wars universe, or definitely a used science fiction universe that isn't really about credibility, but it's more about sort of sensibility. The design has moved into something that feels a little bit more grounded, a little bit more near future, because it is so inspired by some of those traditional transport helicopters. It becomes much more familiar and grounded. So in a sense, what has happened at this point in the process is that there has been two roads has been established. One that is more fantastical, and then one that is more credible. What you see here, what's really important, is playing with angles. So these wings that sort of hold the struts and the pontoons, I give them angles, and also play with angles on these elements here to just try and see if there is anything to really strengthen. And I think these forward wings are now much more interesting to look at than they were before, because the angles will surprise you as the ship maneuvers and as the camera rotates around it. You can see the forward ones that sweep up and the backward ones that sweep down give it sort of a surprising dynamism and also strength. They look like they can take more force at this point. So that's something I do quite a lot, play with angles to just ensure that what is a relatively simple design can have in it surprising axes and angles pop out. So you can see for this one now I'm sort of copying the central design there, for better or worse, right? Make a quick copy, make a quick adjustment to the engine blocks. I gotta test if it works without the swoopy, loopy centerpiece there. And of course, immediately I see a swivel engine design. And that's how my brain works, at least. I just go off on a tangent, and then what the pack allows me to do is really execute on these super swift ideas. And again, playing with the notion of a hovercraft or a helicopter or something like that, I generate this version, which also feels like it could be something, right? It feels quite good. Now it's a little bit lighter than the original design. The original design was more locomotive, troop transport carrier. This one is a little bit more gunship, a little less troop carrier. And you can see I'm sorting back and forth between takes that I like and takes that I like less. And the takes that I like less gets put in the background, and the takes that I like the most gets sort of kept side by side. And here you can see I'm really doubling down on the helicopter thing. It's almost like an Avatarian, a Cameron-esque design here with the hovercraft. It feels like it could be an Avatar. And again, the angles I was talking about before in terms of wings and supports and whatnot are really a key part of this particular design. Again, this is the one we just did, and this is the new one. Again, playing with the width and the strength of the tail. And I like having these two islands of focus. The front being having the wings and the pontoons, and it's almost like arms. And then having over the shoulder line, you have the engine block and all that. The positive thing is that there is two axes going on here, right? That's the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. Horizontal has two islands, engine block and arms, and the body counters that. So there's some interesting spatiality happening and angles happening in the bodywork, which I think is really interesting. So back to these two takes, the original take and the new take. They're beginning to diverge quite a bit, and they're beginning to look quite different. again playing with these wings and these angles. You can see angles on this particular engine mount and wings. And I just want to show you here how that makes, in my opinion, the craft feel quite credible. There's something about the weight and how aircraft are laid out that if you angle the wings like that, there's a centralized, what do you say? The balancing of the aircraft comes back to center because the wings, it's almost like it falls down on its wings until it lands in the center. And this, and then the different engine blocks, I think really works for that purpose. It lends it a lot of credibility, I think. So as I mentioned, this craft has become smaller. It feels smaller than the original take. It can still carry troops. It can still land and, let's say, clear ground for itself to let off its troops. But that was this take. So back to the curse of this particular video and this particular process, which is more ideas, more ship designs, and the continuous stream of consciousness. So here again, you can see the themes I'm playing with is really the horizontal engine layout, the width of that, the weight of that, versus the vertical, slender, narrow body. It's really those two forces that are at play here at the same time. Now something really interesting was happening with that particular shape that surprised me a little bit. There's something about what happens if we remove the tail and make the engine compartment quite big. This feels fresh. There's something Star Warsian about that design, and yet there's some near future surprise in there. The problem I'm beginning to realize right now, as I view the process again, is now I've made the same ship-ish many times, which means I'm reaching a point of a lack of benefit from continuing this process, right? And especially because if I hold them against each other and I normalize them against the same standards like I mentioned earlier, then they aren't allowed to mutate too much. This one is a good example of a mutation that is interesting, where I'm like, okay, now something completely different is happening. But here we are again with this silly shape. I should have just killed that away and put the engine blocks in the back. And so here you can see what I mean. I'm playing with the same themes. So rather than allowing this to live on its own terms, I normalize it a little bit too much. And they are a little too similar, these different takes. But here, let's take a look at this this selection process here. Yeah, there's the locomotive and the fighter, and then we have these sort of helicopter-y versions where there's a sense of central engine block, not rearward engine block, and they have the intake as well, to what looks like a turbine engine set or something like that. Selecting, I'm like, yeah, no, not that one. These three are the key players. It's fun seeing it again. This was recorded a little while ago, and seeing it again, I'm surprised by some of my choices. Some of the choices that I see myself doing aren't necessarily the same I would do with a few months in between. And I really like this one with the funky wings here and the reverse engine and all that has something interesting to it. That said, it feels very used universe. It feels very Star Warsian, where the two other versions maybe have some freshness to me because I've been doing a lot of these types of ships at this time, and having ships that felt more helicopter-like was probably something that felt fresh to me at this point in time. But again, variations on a theme. Here we have these two that look quite similar. There's something about length and strength, but besides that, they look very much the same. So here is the last step. So taking this helicopter shape, I really double down on this swoopy curvature here, because that remained as the most original and fresh part of the idea landscape that I generated on this particular design. And I couldn't let it go. I had all these other designs that I think were functional, actually, but this just spoke to me. And you can see I'm playing with giving it sort of a butt, an insect butt, which could be fun. Maybe you could you can imagine a rotating anti-grav device or something, but I choose to put that at the other axis so it looks like a fan, and then I add these turbine intakes. again, now I think it is, again, back to the realism and the Sikorsky helicopter realism. It's beginning to feel like an object I can understand rather than imagine. And I'm like, yeah, I like that. I feel like I can relate to it more. I feel so confident, in fact, that I start adding details. So at this point, I feel like I'm done with the initial layout phase, and now it is time to dive in and give it a few more details, and adjust and modify. I'm putting in these fans here as well because I figure I need to solve the lift issue. I'm imagining it has a very powerful turbine system, and that it uses compressed air to fly rather than anti-gravity or something weird. I'm deciding on this being a decidedly near future craft. That comes with its own set of problems. We can talk about that in a little bit. Here I'm just ensuring that the texture mapping isn't too noisy. Of course, you can see this particular trim sheet texture has this paneling and this different colors. That means that it is very forgiving across many designs and many crafts, and they look pretty good up front. However, if you want to control how the surfaces look, it's necessary to select certain parts of the surfacing here, as you can see that I'm doing. And I'm mapping that with cylindrical mapping, and I'm then moving the selection around the texture map to clean up the surfaces a little bit so it isn't super duper noisy. Noisy as in it shouldn't have too many panels, because then the texturing feels out of scale with the object itself. See, so here is one of the challenges with having this indefinite versioning happening. I'm doubting myself, and I'm allowing that to happen. So I'm moving around these turbine intakes back and forth and out to the sides and whatnot. And it's almost like I've gotten addicted to or used to the change over the decisiveness of it. So almost as if I feel like the strength of this process is to keep iterating and keep modifying, which isn't exactly true. There's certainly a trade-off, let's put it like that. But again, happy enough to go and find some details and some greebles and some pipes and whatnot, and some sensors for the nose or whatnot, and I just beam them back to a central point on the ship, and I'm doing a little bit of greebling here. Again, if you want to do near future, you probably have to be careful with too many greebles, because then it starts to feel like a 0G spacecraft, and it starts to feel like it has a very specific 1970s, 1980s aesthetic. And so the greebling has to be quite minimal if I want to retain the sensation of an atmospheric craft, and if I want to retain the sensation of a craft that doesn't belong to classic sci-fi properties or the sort of rose-colored romance of sci-fi of the past. And so I'm keeping that at a reasonable minimum. Of course, it's difficult not to use them when they're right over here in the file, and they are so much fun to use. I figure a little bit on the backbone there works. Playing a lot with this cap-like sun visor for the roof over the canopy, because I feel like it accents the sense of a freight train. It also feels like a cap, so it makes it feel like a character. It has a flavor all to its own. Here's an overlook of the different versions. You can see from the freight train version over the fighter to this sort of quad looking thing where some patterns are emerging. Here there's an odd one in the middle there. These two are quite weird. They don't belong anywhere. They don't belong in any family. Again, back to this helicopterian, that's a word, take. And you can see one of the things I've been doing here, I've moved forward the central air compressor, the central fan, because I couldn't live with the fact that the weight distribution felt off. It felt wrong to me. And this is where we ended. A craft that is decidedly more helicopter than it is spacecraft, that is decidedly more near future than it is romantic retro sci-fi. I'm playing with some texture maps, and I have some in the bank. I can just slap them on and get different takes quite easily. And I really accentuated the sense of the ducted turbine intakes again to get that Sikorsky helicopter feel. So rather than being something from an unknown future or an unknown past, now this craft feels like it could be 50 years in the future. And I like that. I think that's pretty fun. You can see how long it is. It almost feels like a naval rescue vessel or something, right? You can fly over and pull up some sailors in the big drink, for instance. I like how credible it is. I like how relatable it is. And I think that this was an interesting journey with some pros and cons. Let's discuss them. Yeah, so that was it. This ship was a whole journey. This video you just saw is around 6 to 8 hours compressed into this, apologies by the way, super chaotic, high-speed flicker vision insanity. But I think what I talked about here, and you can see what I mean, there are definitely some pros and cons. I have a few notes here. I would usually say that the lack of purpose, the lack of having a clear plan, the lack of knowing exactly whether you are doing an attack ship, a troop carrier, whatever design, whatever intended purpose your design has, the benefit of not knowing that is that you are free to discover things out in the chaos of the unknown, right? Your mind is free to wander beyond your plan and your intellect and your knowledge, and you can discover accidents, happy accidents. I really do believe that, and I think that is the pro here. I think the downside, as you saw in the video, is that I end up doing 3 versions of the same idea, and I keep coming back to the same idea. So I mismanage my time a little bit, and there is definitely some preying happening on the same ideas, and it's not really the work isn't particularly structured. So I think that maybe a combination of discovering the unknown and then this a bit more structure would be good. But yeah, for sure, I was losing some time in delving into things that didn't quite work. At the same time, I would say over this process of a bunch of hours, I felt like I wasn't landing it. So by keeping up the good fight and by keeping the let's say forward but sometimes sideways momentum up and not giving up, I came back to this central fan idea that made me feel like I had something that felt relatable and credible, yet original. I would say one of the things here is the design I was doing clearly ended up fitting different types of universes, and I think in a real work situation or a real design situation, you would of course know what world you're designing for. As I mentioned, at the same time, by going beyond that, you can discover maybe and grab some of the benefits of, let's say, a universe that has a different style and bring it back to this universe. For instance, I would say I could bring some of the accents of the real world design into a more fantastical sci-fi setting, and vice versa. You could do that. So again, I would say there's still benefit going into the unknown and retrieving gold from out there in the zone. But yeah, that's some thoughts on the pros and cons of infinite iteration. I would say I'm 70% pleased and only 30% displeased. But there is definitely a pro and a con. See you next time. Hey everybody, welcome. Today, no. Hey everybody, no.